A wealthy loner weeps for having no children, until hungry twins knock on his door and say, "Sir, could you give us a plate of food? We haven't eaten for 2 days." He freezes. The children look exactly like he did when he was a kid. Leon Hartley adjusted his tie and gazed out the window of his office. The sun was setting behind the skyscrapers, painting the sky in orange shades that none of the buildings he'd designed could ever truly capture. 40 years of life, and a view many would do anything to have. "Mr. Hartley, the Riverside project documents have been signed and sent. Do you need anything else before I leave?" His assistant's voice brought him back to reality. Miranda, always efficient, always punctual. "No, thank you, you can go, have a nice weekend." She smiled, nodded, and closed the door. The sound of her heels faded down the hallway until it disappeared. And then, silence. That same silence that followed him from an empty apartment to a bustling office and back home again, every single day. Leon turned his chair around and contemplated his empire. The wall lined with awards and recognitions, the tempered glass desk that cost more than some cars, plants perfectly tended by someone he hired, everything immaculate, everything empty. He stood up and walked to the bookshelf. Among books on architecture and neatly organized folders, there was a single photo. Leon receiving the Architect of the Year award 5 years ago. He was alone in the picture, just as he was in life. His phone vibrated, a message from his most important client at the moment. "Projects approved. Congratulations on the excellent work. Transfer completed." Leon glanced at the bank notification that arrived right after, another 6 figures in his account, money that would pay for more things, objects, solo trips in luxury hotels, restaurants where the waiters already knew his usual order, yet knew nothing about him. His apartment awaited him a few blocks away. A duplex penthouse with a panoramic view of Central Park. 3 bedrooms, all empty except his own. A kitchen equipped with appliances he barely knew how to use. A living room that had never witnessed a party or a family gathering. He grabbed his coat and turned off the office lights. In the mirrored elevator, he stared at his reflection. Well-groomed hair, tailored suit, a face some would still call attractive at 40, the appearance of success. The building's doorman greeted him respectfully. The valet brought his imported car around. People who knew his name but not his story. People who saw him every day but never really saw him at all. Once home, he dropped his briefcase on the Italian leather couch and went straight to the kitchen. He opened an expensive bottle of wine, poured a glass, and took it to the terrace. The city sparkled beneath him, millions of lit windows, millions of lives being lived, families having dinner together, couples watching movies, kids being put to bed. Leon sat on a lounge chair and sipped his wine. His thoughts drifted to the relationships he'd had, brief, superficial, always ending when things got too serious, always his fault, fear of compromising his career, his freedom, his plans. What plans were those anyway? Work until when? Earn how much more? Build structures for other people to live their lives while his remained on blueprints that never left the drafting table. He went back inside and walked through the empty rooms, the guest room that never hosted anyone, the home office as methodically organized as the professional one, the dining room with a table for 8, where he ate alone when he didn't order takeout. He opened a desk drawer and found an old envelope. Inside was a letter, the last serious girlfriend he'd had, almost 10 years ago. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Leon, but I'm sure I'm not it." She got married to someone else 5 years ago. Now she had 2 kids, a family. Leon sat in the office chair and stared at the computer screen. More projects, more meetings, more awards on the horizon. And then, the lump in his throat came without warning. The first tear fell onto the glass desk, and then, like a dam finally giving way, Leon Hartley, the successful architect, the man who turned dreams into solid structures, broke down. He cried for the time he'd lost, for the "we'll talk about it later" moments that never happened, for the hands he hadn't held tightly enough, for the chances to become a father he'd let slip by. He cried for what money could never buy, someone to love and care for. In the silence of that perfect to empty home, Leon finally faced the truth his professional success could no longer hide. He had built everything but the essential. Leon woke up with a start in the office armchair. The empty wine glass lay on its side on the desk, a small red stain marking one of his sketches for a new architectural design. He rubbed his eyes, trying to shake off the lingering drowsiness. The apartment was submerged in silence as always, but something had startled him awake. And then he heard it again. 3 soft knocks at the door. His first instinct was to check the time. 3:28 a.m. Who could it be at this hour? A neighbor with an emergency? No, unlikely. His neighbors barely knew he existed, even though he'd lived there for 5 years. The knocks came again, a bit louder this time, but still hesitant. Leon stood up, straightening his wrinkled shirt. He crossed the dark hallway, guided by the city lights shining through the large windows. He didn't turn on the lights. Years of living alone had given him a mental map of every inch of that space. At the door, his sense of self-preservation kicked in. What if it was some kind of break-in attempt, a scam? The front desk hadn't announced anyone, and the building's security was one reason why he paid such high maintenance fees. He cautiously looked through the peephole. What he saw on the other side confused him even more. There were no adults, just 2 children standing in the well-lit hallway. Leon undid the safety latch and opened the door just a crack, keeping the chain in place. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice still rough from sleep and surprise. There, under the hallway light, were 2 boys, identical twins. Far too thin for their apparent age. Their clothes were dirty and worn out, as if they'd been wearing them for days. Their dark hair was disheveled, and their eyes, those huge, frightened eyes, seemed to carry a burden no child should ever bear. The boy, who stood slightly ahead, as if protecting his brother, looked directly at Leon. "Sir, could you give us something to eat?" he asked, his voice surprisingly firm and polite for someone so small. "We haven't eaten in 2 days." Leon froze, not because of the words themselves, although they were worrying enough, not because of how absurd it was to have kids asking for food at his door in the middle of the night. What paralyzed him was seeing his own features in their faces. The same almond-shaped eyes, the same peculiar curve of the eyebrows, the same chin with a subtle dimple in the center, the same nose, slightly upturned at the tip. It was like looking at a photograph he'd never taken of himself as a child. Leon froze. The boys had the same face he used to have as a kid. A wave of chills ran down his spine. Was this some kind of hallucination? Was he still asleep in the office, dreaming about child versions of himself as some manifestation of remorse over his lonely life? But the cold air from the hallway was flowing through the crack in the door, and the boys were trembling slightly, their thin arms covered in goosebumps. Leon swallowed hard and tried to find his voice again. "Where did you come from?" he finally managed to ask. "Where are your parents?" The 2 exchanged quick glances, silent communication only siblings share. "We came from far away," the same boy answered. "Our mom, she disappeared. We don't know where she is." The other boy, who stood a step behind, lowered his gaze even more. His small hands gripped the hem of his dirty shirt, twisting the fabric nervously. 1,000 questions exploded in Leon's mind, but there was a more urgent need to address first. "Are you hungry now?" he asked, removing the chain from the door. Both nodded silently. Leon opened the door all the way. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. "I'll fix you something to eat." The boys entered cautiously, as if stepping onto unknown, potentially dangerous territory. Their eyes scanned the stylish apartment, taking in the expensive furniture and minimalist decor with a mix of awe and distrust. Leon led them to the kitchen and turned on the lights. Under the bright illumination, the resemblance was even more startling. There was no denying the connection his eyes were seeing, even if his brain still fought to comprehend it. "Have a seat," he said, indicating the tall stools by the marble counter. The boys obeyed quietly, climbing the stools with some difficulty. Their feet dangled, unable to reach the footrest. Sitting side by side, they seemed even smaller, more vulnerable. Leon opened the fridge, thankful he kept a few basics despite rarely cooking. He found a container of ready-to-heat soup, something healthy and easy to prepare. While he set a pot on the stove, he tried to establish some conversation. "What are your names?" he asked, striving to keep his tone casual. Once again, That silent communication passed between them before one answered. "I'm Eli," said the boy who always spoke first. "And this is my brother Noah." Eli and Noah. Leon repeated their names in his head, sensing a strange familiarity, like he had always known them. "I'm Leon," he replied. "Leon Hartley." Eli nodded slightly, as if confirming something he already suspected. Noah, still silent, watched Leon's every move with keen attention, his eyes following each gesture as Leon stirred the soup. Silence settled in the kitchen, broken only by the gentle sound of soup starting to bubble. Leon tried once more. "How did you get in here?" "This building has security at the front desk." Eli shifted his gaze for an instant. "We came in when someone was leaving. We waited in the lobby for a while, then..." He hesitated. "We saw your name on the resident list." That explained how they'd entered the building, but not why they'd chosen his door specifically. Leon decided not to push too hard yet. There was a fragile moment here that could break under too many questions. The soup was ready. Leon ladled 2 generous bowls and set them before the boys, along with spoons and napkins. "Careful, it's hot," he warned. "Eat slowly." The way they devoured their food confirmed what they'd said about not eating for days. Even so, they tried to maintain a certain politeness, blowing each spoonful and wiping their mouths with the napkins. Leon sat on the other side of the counter, observing them in silence. While they ate, he noticed more details: the shape of their hands, the way they furrowed their brows when concentrating. How Eli, even though he was starving, occasionally glanced at his brother to make sure Noah was also eating well. These gestures felt so familiar, like seeing a distorted mirror from his own past. When they finished, Noah, who still hadn't spoken directly to Leon, surprised him. "Thank you, sir," he said in a quiet but clear voice. "You can call me Leon," he replied automatically. Then a practical matter arose. "Do you have somewhere to stay tonight?" The two looked at each other again. "Not really," Eli answered, "but we don't want to bother you. You've already been so kind giving us food." Leon knew what he should do: call the police or social services, report 2 abandoned or lost children. It was the correct, responsible, safe procedure. But those faces that were like childhood photos of himself, and that inexplicable resemblance. "You can stay here tonight," he said, before he could think it through. "I have a big couch in the living room. Tomorrow we can figure things out." Relief washed over their faces. Their small shoulders, previously tense, visibly relaxed. "Thank you," Eli said again, his voice now carrying more emotion than before. Leon nodded, still processing his own decision. "But first," he continued, trying to sound practical, "you need a hot bath and clean clothes. I don't have anything in your size, but maybe some of my t-shirts can work as pajamas for now." As he prepared the guest bathroom, Leon tried to organize his thoughts. The resemblance might be a coincidence. No, it was too specific, too detailed. But what did it mean? And why had these boys come specifically to his door? He found 2 clean t-shirts, the smallest he owned. He also set out soft towels and basic toiletries he kept for guests, rare as those were. When he returned to the living room, he found Eli and Noah exactly where he had left them, perched on the kitchen stools, motionless, as if afraid to touch anything without permission. "The bath is ready," he called. "Come on, I'll show you the bathroom." He led them down the hallway to the guest bathroom. He explained how the shower faucet worked, where to find the towels and soap. He left the t-shirts folded on the sink. "I'll be in the living room if you need anything," he said, closing the door to give them privacy. While the boys showered, Leon paced restlessly around the living room. Should he call someone? But who, and what would he say? "I have 2 kids here who look exactly like I did as a child." It would sound absurd. Besides, something inside him resisted the idea of handing them over to strangers, at least until he understood more. The sound of running water stopped. Minutes later, the boys emerged from the bathroom. The transformation was remarkable. Clean, wearing oversized t-shirts that served as nightgowns, they looked like entirely different children. Their wet, combed hair highlighted the resemblance to Leon even more. Their clean faces revealed faint freckles on their cheeks, just like the ones Leon had had as a kid. Clean. They looked even more undeniably his. The thought surfaced unbidden, and Leon couldn't shake it. He fixed up the large sofa in the living room, turning it into a makeshift bed. He laid out fresh sheets, 2 soft pillows, and warm blankets. The couch was wide enough to fit both boys comfortably. "You can sleep here tonight," he said, smoothing out the sheet one last time. "Tomorrow we'll talk more." Eli and Noah looked at the improvised bed with expressions mixing gratitude with lingering mistrust, like children who'd learned not to expect kindness from the world. "Thank you," Eli said, looking Leon in the eye. "You're a good person." Something stirred in Leon's chest at those simple words. How long had it been since anyone saw good in him, beyond his professional competence? "Good night," was all he managed to say, his throat suddenly tight. He watched as the 2 boys climbed onto the couch and settled under the blankets. They didn't spread out, as most kids would do in such a large space. Instead, they nestled together in the center, sharing the same spot as if they'd never slept any other way. As if they knew tomorrow was uncertain, and the only real comfort was each other's presence. Leon turned off the main lights, leaving only a corner lamp with a soft glow, and withdrew to his bedroom. But instead of lying down, he sat on the edge of the bed, his mind spinning with unanswerable questions. Those kids had his face, his eyes, his expressions, the same faint freckles he once had, which had faded over time, the same nail shapes. And it wasn't just physical appearance. There was something in the way they moved, in how Eli protected his quieter brother, that resonated with something deeply familiar inside Leon. Like a genetic code he recognized, without ever having seen it before. Could it be? No. He'd never had children. He would have known. Someone would have told him. Unless the mother never said anything. Unless he was never informed. Leon tried to recall old relationships, women who might have gotten pregnant without his knowledge. There had been a few brief flings, always overshadowed by his career. None lasted more than a few months. Could one of those women have had his twins? And why would they show up now at his door in the middle of the night? Nothing made sense, yet looking at those faces, everything seemed to click together in a strange, profound way. He finally lay down, knowing sleep would not come easily. The bedroom ceiling had never seemed so interesting as his mind roamed through possibilities, some rational, others completely wild. In the next room, the twins slept peacefully, exhausted from hunger, fear, and momentary relief. Leon could hear their gentle breathing through the thin wall. Amid all the questions and confusion, a new and powerful feeling started growing inside him, an instinct he had never experienced, but which felt as natural as breathing. Leon offers soup, blankets, and quiet acceptance. The boys, Eli and Noah, speak little, but they thank him. They sleep together on the couch, as if aware tomorrow is unsure. Leon feels something stirring within, a long-dormant impulse he's never lived, a desire to care for someone. It was as if something that had been dormant for 40 years had suddenly awakened, a part of him that had always existed but had never been called into action. Now, with Eli and Noah sleeping on his couch, this force took over, redefining priorities and reshaping perspectives. Having never pictured himself as a father, never really considered parenthood beyond a vague or distant concept, Leon felt a protective urge so strong it almost frightened him. He wanted to ensure they were safe. He wanted to learn more about them. He wanted to understand how they ended up there and why they looked so much like him. Above all, he wanted them never to go hungry again, never to have to knock on a stranger's door asking for food, never again to sleep in fear of tomorrow. For the first time in his life, Leon felt there was something more important than his projects, his career, his personal comfort, and the strangest part, it wasn't scary. It felt like coming home after a very, very long journey. The alarm went off at 6:30 like every morning. Leon opened his eyes, staring at his bedroom ceiling. For the first time in years, work was not his first thought. It was the memory that he wasn't alone in the apartment. Eli and Noah, the boys, the twins who showed up at his door with faces that mirrored his own childhood. A week had passed since that night. A week of excuses to the office. A week of just a few more days to sort this out. A week that changed everything. Leon got up, slipped on his slippers, and went to the kitchen. Before all, his breakfast was a mechanical and solitary ritual. Black coffee, a piece of fruit, maybe toast. Now, he opened the fridge and pulled out eggs, milk, fresh fruit that were never on his old grocery lists. He sliced apples thinly, set aside strawberries, prepared pancake batter following a recipe he'd found online the night before. The sweet, warm aroma filled the kitchen and spread through the once quiet, lifeless apartment. While flipping the first pancake, he heard light footsteps in the hallway. "Good morning," said Noah, the quieter of the two, still wearing the new pajamas Leon had bought 3 days earlier. Eli appeared soon after, hair messy, eyes still sleepy. "Are you making pancakes again?" he asked with a grin. "Yes," Leon replied, "but this time I'm trying a new recipe. Can you set the table for me?" The boys eagerly took on the task. Eli grabbed plates from the cupboard while Noah arranged cutlery and napkins. A table that for years had only collected mail was now the setting for a shared meal. "This is so good," Eli exclaimed, mouth full of pancake and jam. "Chew first, then talk," Leon corrected automatically, surprising himself with the paternal tone that came so naturally. Noah giggled softly, covering his mouth. "So you both have toothbrushes, right?" Leon asked as he cleared the empty plates. "We'll brush our teeth and then figure out what to do today." "Isn't today a work day?" Eli asked, frowning. Leon shook his head. "No, today's Saturday. No work. A day to—" He paused, looking for the right words. "A day for us to spend together." The bathroom, once a place of quick, efficient routines, turned into a little party. Leon taught them how much toothpaste to use, how to brush in circular motions, and laughed when Eli made a foam moustache on his face. After that, the hunt for Noah's lost sock became an expedition. All three were on their knees, peeking under furniture, behind curtains, inside decorative vases that had never served any real purpose beyond aesthetics. "Found it!" Noah yelled more enthusiastically than Leon had ever heard him, pulling the missing sock from behind the couch. Everyone celebrated as if it were a grand achievement. That afternoon, while rain tapped gently on the windows, Leon suggested a game to pass the time. "How about hide and seek?" The boys exchanged puzzled looks. "How do you play that?" Eli asked, revealing yet another gap in their childhood experiences. Leon felt a pang in his chest. Such a simple, classic childhood game, and they didn't know it. How many other firsts were yet to come? "It's easy," he explained, sitting on the rug with them. "One person closes their eyes and counts to 20 while the others hide. Then you go find them." The living room, hallway, and bedrooms, once formal, lifeless spaces, became worlds of adventure. Leon never imagined his closet could be such a coveted hiding spot, or that under the dining table could be so much fun. Their laughter echoed off the walls that once only knew silence. Leon found himself laughing too, a sound he barely recognized in himself anymore. Night fell, and after a simple but shared dinner, Leon settled in with the boys in the living room. The TV, once used only for financial news, now displayed a cartoon movie. "Leon?" Eli called during a calmer scene in the movie. "Yes." "May I tell you a story?" Leon looked at him, surprised by the request. "Of course." Eli shifted on the couch, taking on the posture of an important storyteller. Noah scooted closer, as if already familiar with what was about to be told. "Once upon a time there was a kingdom far, far away," Eli began, his voice assuming a solemn tone. "In that kingdom, people could fly." "Like birds?" Leon asked, playing along. "Not exactly like birds," Eli corrected seriously. "They had special wings made of something shiny like the moon, and they could only fly at night," Noah added, surprising everyone with his spontaneous contribution. Leon listened intently as the story unfolded with floating castles, secret rooms, and missions only twins could complete. He asked questions at the right moments, marveled at their imaginative twists, and applauded at the heroic ending. "That was an amazing story," he praised sincerely. "Did you come up with all that?" Eli nodded proudly. "At the foster shelter, we told stories at night so we wouldn't be scared," he explained, before realizing he'd revealed more than he intended. Leon absorbed this information in silence. a foster shelter. Another piece in the puzzle of these boys' past. Bedtime brought new rituals, brushing teeth again, putting on clean pajamas, fixing the couch with fresh sheets. "Do you want me to read something to you?" Leon offered, sitting on the edge of the couch where the two were already tucked in. "Can you tell us one of your stories?" Noah asked in a sleepy voice. Leon smiled. "How about a story about an architect who built tree houses for forest fairies?" The boys smiled, snuggling deeper under the blankets. When he finished the story, Noah was already asleep. Eli fought to keep his heavy eyelids open. "Thank you," he mumbled, almost inaudibly. "For what?" Leon asked softly. "For not sending us away." Those simple words hit Leon like a punch in the gut. He leaned in and pulled the blanket up over Eli's small shoulders. "Nothing to thank me for," he replied, his voice tight. "Good night, Eli." "Good night." Eli hesitated a moment, as if about to say something else, but then just smiled and closed his eyes. Leaving the door slightly ajar, he had learned they preferred it that way, Leon stepped into the hallway and glanced around his apartment. The same sophisticated furniture was there, the same carefully selected artwork, the same spectacular view of the city from the panoramic windows. But now there were small shoes lined up next to his own at the entrance. Colorful drawings stuck to the fridge with dinosaur magnets, a fort made of cushions in the middle of the living room, remnants of an afternoon adventure. The house was no longer just a backdrop, it had become a home. Leon knew he had to make decisions, call the authorities, look for the missing mother, regularize this improbable situation. But for now, he just wanted to preserve what was happening. This quiet transformation of physical and emotional spaces. He still didn't call himself a father, but he was already acting like one. And, surprisingly, it felt like the most natural role he'd ever taken on. Rain gently tapped against the apartment windows, creating a watery curtain that distorted the city lights outside. Inside, the kitchen was warm and inviting. Leon was finishing dinner, something he never did before the boys arrived. Over the past 2 weeks, he'd become an enthusiastic amateur cook, following online recipes with the same focus he once gave his architectural projects. "I think it's ready," he announced, carefully taking the casserole out of the oven. The beef and vegetable stew released a cloud of aromatic steam when Leon lifted the lid. It wasn't a gourmet meal, but it was his best effort so far. Before one, his dinner might have been takeout or, on healthier days, a pre-made salad. Eli and Noah were already seated at the table, napkins on their laps, as Leon had taught them. Eli, the older twin, swung his legs anxiously. Noah, always more reserved, watched every move as Leon served the food. "Smells really good," Eli said, leaning forward while Leon ladled the stew into deep bowls. "Hope it tastes as good as it smells," Leon replied with a smile, placing the bowls in front of them. "Be careful, it's hot." As they ate, Leon discreetly observed the twins. Each passing day, he noticed more similarities between them and himself. It wasn't just the obvious physical traits, identical eyes, same face shape, the faint freckles, but their mannerisms, expressions, and reactions. Noah's furrowed brow when he concentrated. Eli's habit of running a hand through his hair when he was thinking. Tiny mirrors of his own habits. "Does it taste good?" he asked, breaking the brief silence. "So good," Eli replied between spoonfuls. "Better than yesterday." "I agree," Noah added, his soft voice barely audible over the rain. Leon smiled, feeling that strange warmth in his chest he had grown accustomed to over the last few weeks, an emotion he struggled to name. A mix of pride, protectiveness, and belonging he'd never felt before. But with that warmth came questions. So many unanswered questions that kept him awake at night, staring at the ceiling. Who exactly were these boys? Why did they look so much like him? How had they found his apartment, and where was their mother? That last question plagued him especially. Enough time had passed, he needed to know more. "Boys," he began, trying to sound casual as he served Eli another ladleful of stew. "You mentioned your mother disappeared. What's she like? Could you tell me more about her?" The twins exchanged that silent look again, the kind only they understood. Surprisingly, Noah spoke first, She's pretty, he said in a soft but clear voice. Dark hair like this? He gestured at shoulder level. And she wears glasses when she reads or works at the computer, Eli added. She says they're just to rest her eyes, but I think she really needs them. Leon nodded, soaking up every detail. A picture began forming in his mind, stirring old memories. She always sang to us before bed, Noah continued, his gaze distant as though recalling the memory. Even when she was really tired. And she's really smart, Eli added proudly. She works with microscopes and science stuff. Leon's heart skipped a beat. Microscopes. Science stuff. The possibility he'd been considering took on more weight. She sounds amazing, he commented, trying to keep his voice steady. What's her name? Evelyn, Eli replied, taking another spoonful of stew. Our mom's name is Evelyn. The name hit Leon like a bolt of lightning. Evelyn. Could it be a coincidence? Probably not. His hand suddenly felt weak, and his fork slipped, clattering against the bowl. Leon. Are you okay? Eli asked, noticing his reaction. Yes, Leon quickly recovered. It's just... He hesitated, then decided to be direct. Do you know your mom's last name? Once again, those shared glances. She's Evelyn Marie Caldwell, Noah replied quietly. The second blow was stronger than the first. It wasn't just the first name, it was the full name. Evelyn Marie Caldwell. The same Evelyn he had known years ago, years back. He'd had a brief relationship with Evelyn Caldwell. 4 intense months with a brilliant biologist he'd met at the opening of a building he designed. She had bright green eyes, a sharp mind, and a smile that hinted at secrets. They'd talk for hours about the intersection of architecture and nature, how biological structures could inspire sustainable design. And then she vanished without explanation. One morning, Leon woke to a text. I need time. Please don't look for me. He tried calling, emailing, even visiting the lab where she worked. Nothing. As if she'd evaporated. Eventually, wounded pride and a thriving career made him give up. He buried the memories of her and moved on. Or so he thought. Leon. Eli's voice pulled him back. You look weird. Leon realized he had drifted off in thought, the stew growing cold before him. Sorry, he said, regaining composure. I was just thinking. That name... He hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. It reminds me of someone I once knew. You knew someone named Evelyn? Noah asked, eyes wide with interest. Leon nodded slowly. Yes, a long time ago. Was it our mom? Eli asked directly, leaning across the table. His meal was momentarily forgotten. The directness of the question startled Leon. He looked into the boy's eyes, so much like his own, and saw a perceptiveness well beyond his years. I'm not sure, Leon said honestly. The Evelyn I knew was a scientist. She worked in genetics. Both boys' eyes widened at once. That's her, Eli exclaimed, nearly knocking over his juice. Our mom is a scientist. She had a lab with microscopes and test tubes, and talked about DNA and genes, Noah added, his usually calm voice now excited. She showed us pictures in big books. Leon's heart felt like it was in his throat. There was no doubt now. It was the same Evelyn. If it was the same Evelyn, then these boys... How old are you? He asked, voice trembling slightly. 6, Noah replied. We turned 6 2 months ago. Leon did some quick mental math. 6 years and 2 months, plus 9 months of pregnancy. That lined up exactly with the time he'd been with Evelyn. The timing was perfect. He looked at the boys with new eyes. They weren't just children who needed help, not merely kids who somehow resembled him. There was more and more evidence suggesting they were his children, children he never knew existed, children Evelyn had chosen to keep from him for some reason. Did your mum ever mention your father? He began, struggling for the right words. The twins exchanged yet another glance, but this time something else lingered in their silent communication. Hesitation, perhaps. Mum used to say he lived very far away, Eli finally replied, that one day we would meet him. She had a picture of you hidden, Noah added so quietly Leon almost missed it. In an envelope in her drawer. We saw it once. Leon felt as if the world had stopped spinning. A photo of him. Evelyn had kept a photo all these years. "What happened to your mom?" he asked, voice shaking. "You said she disappeared, but how?" "She got sick," Noah said, lowering his eyes to the bowl. "She stayed in bed a lot. Then she had to go to the hospital. And she never came back," Eli added, a shadow crossing his young face. "The lady from social services said she needed to stay there, but we couldn't visit. We ended up in a foster shelter," Noah continued, "but it wasn't nice there, so—" He trailed off as if afraid to continue. "So we ran away," Eli finished, "and came looking for you." "Looking for me?" Leon barely managed the words. "You knew who I was. Where to find me?" Eli nodded. "We saw your name on the envelope with the photo, and your address was on the back." This revelation fell on Leon like a weight. It wasn't coincidence or fate, it was a deliberate choice. These boys had sought him out. Somehow, they had navigated the city on their own to find him. "Why didn't you tell me all this before?" he asked gently, no accusation in his tone. "We were scared," Eli answered simply. "Scared you wouldn't want us." Leon felt his heart clench. The protective instinct he had been experiencing in recent weeks now overflowed. He stood up and walked around the table, kneeling between the boys' chairs. "Look at me," he asked softly, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. "I want you here. Understand? I want you here with me." The boy's eyes filled with cautious hope. "Did you really know our mom?" Noah asked. "Yes," Leon said, voice tight with emotion. "And I'm almost certain now that I'm your father." The words hung in the warm kitchen air, changing everything, redefining reality. There was no going back. The past, present, and future converged in that moment. Could it be? Not just possible, it was real. It was happening. He had finally found what he'd always been missing, what money could never buy, a family. The clock read 11:47 p.m. when Leon finally closed his laptop. The boys had been asleep for hours, but he couldn't rest, not with so many questions pounding in his mind. Evelyn Marie Caldwell, the name he couldn't stop repeating in his head since last night's dinner. The woman who had appeared then disappeared from his life years ago, leaving a void he filled with work and material success. The woman who, apparently, had given birth to his children without ever telling him. Why? That was the question keeping him awake. Why would she hide something like that? Why keep the twins away from him? More importantly, where was she now? Leon got up and walked quietly down the hall to the room where Eli and Noah slept. He opened the door just enough to see their outlines in the dim light. Two small bodies under the blankets, breathing softly in unison. Something squeezed inside his chest as he looked at them. A certainty that went beyond logic or evidence, even without official proof. Deep down he knew. They are mine. His children. His blood. A piece of him existed in the world without his knowledge. He gently closed the door and returned to his bedroom. He needed answers, not just for himself, but for Eli and Noah. They deserved to know what happened to their mother. And he needed to understand this whole mystery. The next morning, Leon made a phone call he never imagined making. "Ricardo Mendez Investigations." "Good morning," answered a professional voice on the other end. "Good morning. My name is Leon Hartley. I need help locating someone." While arranging details with the investigator, Leon heard the boys waking up. Light footsteps in the hallway, the sound of water running, two small voices arguing over who got the toothpaste first. His life had changed drastically in a matter of weeks, and it was about to change even more. "Everything you can find on Evelyn Marie Caldwell," he concluded before hanging up. "And if possible, as soon as you can." When he walked into the kitchen, he found Eli trying to reach the cereal box on the highest shelf, while Noah laid bowls on the table. "Good morning," he said, feigning cheerfulness he didn't quite feel. "Who's hungry?" "Me," they replied in unison, one of the rare moments their distinct personalities perfectly lined up. As he prepared breakfast, Leon watched them with new eyes. The same gestures as always, Eli swinging his legs restlessly, Noah folding the napkin meticulously, now seemed loaded with meaning. tiny genetic legacies, tiny hints of himself in these little lives. "Leon," Eli spoke up, interrupting his thoughts, "could you teach me how to tie my shoelaces today?" "Sure," he answered, pouring milk into Noah's bowl. "Right after breakfast." The day passed in a series of seemingly ordinary moments that Leon now cherished with new significance. Teaching Eli to tie his laces, sitting on the living room rug, repeating the process dozens of times until the boy finally succeeded. Helping Noah build a tower of blocks in the bedroom, marveling at the same intense focus Leon used when working on a complex design. His mind kept drifting back to Evelyn. Memories he'd buried for years resurfaced with painful clarity. The way she flipped her hair to the side when focused, her passionate voice talking about her research, the sparkle in her eyes when discussing the future. Was there love there? Leon wasn't sure. It was intense, yes. Intellectually stimulating, certainly. But too brief to become something deeper. Or at least that's what he'd believed at the time. Now, knowing she'd kept a photo of him, that she'd written down his address, maybe Evelyn felt something stronger than he'd realized. That afternoon, while the twins watched a cartoon on TV, his phone rang. It was the investigator. "Mr. Hartley, I have some initial information," said Ricardo Mendez, his tone professional. "Evelyn Marie Caldwell, 38 years old, biologist specializing in molecular genetics, worked at the National Biomolecular Research Center until about 4 years ago. After that, records become sparse." Leon's heart pounded. Definitely her. "And the last few years? Where's she been? Where is she now?" "I'm still investigating," Ricardo replied. "But I found out she gave birth to twins 6 years ago in May. Their birth records are correct, but..." "But what?" Leon gripped the phone tightly. "The father field is blank." Leon felt a sting in his chest. Blank. His name should have been there, not an empty space. "Please keep looking," he said. "I need to know where she is now." "And why the boys?" He glanced at Eli and Noah in the living room. Why they ended up alone? After hanging up, Leon sat next to the twins on the couch. They immediately snuggled against him, their physical closeness something that had become normal over the past weeks. Eli rested his head on Leon's shoulder. Noah pressed against his arm. A strange, new warmth filled him. A sense of belonging he'd never felt. Like a puzzle piece he never knew was missing, now fitting into place. Days turned into a routine of anxious waiting for new information and moments of domestic normalcy. Leon still went to the office occasionally, but rearranged his projects to work mostly from home. His priority was clear now. The boys first, everything else second. Each morning brought new discoveries, exactly how to make sandwiches, crusts off for Eli, cut into triangles for Noah, how to tidy up their small beds with dinosaur and star-patterned sheets, how to confirm they actually brushed their teeth instead of just running the toothbrush underwater. At night, as he tucked them in, Leon realized he was building memories, not just for the boys, but for himself. Invented stories about space architects building houses on Mars, goodnight hugs that felt like they were repairing something inside him he hadn't known was broken. A week after hiring the investigator, more information came in. Evelyn had moved multiple times over the past few years. Small apartments in modest neighborhoods, far from the academic and sophisticated environment Leon had once known her in. It seems she had financial difficulties, Ricardo explained. She left her research career, worked in smaller labs, then at a pharmacy. The records show she was hospitalized a few times over the last year. Hospitalized? Leon felt a blade of worry cut through him. Why? Still trying to access medical records. It's complicated for privacy reasons. Leon hung up, torn between concern for Evelyn and the growing certainty about his bond with the boys. They were increasingly integrated into his life. He couldn't imagine the apartment without them, the days without their curious questions, or the nights without their gentle breathing in the next room. Even without absolute proof, a DNA test, Leon knew. He felt it in the warmth of seeing them asleep. He saw it in their mannerisms. He sensed it in the immediate connection he'd felt since that first night. "They're mine," he thought, tidying scattered toys in the living room. "My children." And with that realization came a darker thought. If Evelyn was sick, if she had disappeared, he needed to protect these boys. He needed to ensure they'd never suffer again. He needed to make official what he already felt in his heart. But first, he needed the full truth. Leon woke up disoriented. For a moment, he didn't know what had startled him. The bedroom was dark, except for the faint blue glow of the digital clock reading 2:17 a.m. He remained still, listening. Then it came again, a low sob, then another. He got up quickly, instinct kicking in before he could fully process. The hallway was dark, but a thin line of light came from the boys' room. The door was ajar as usual. He approached silently and peeked through the gap. The lamp, shaped like a moon, cast a soft glow across the room. The twins were both on Eli's bed, sitting pressed against each other. They hadn't noticed him standing by the door. Noah had his face buried in his hands, his small shoulders shaking with muffled sobs. Eli held him, one arm around his brother's shoulder and the other wiping away his own tears. It was such an intimate, raw moment of grief that Leon almost stepped back. But then he heard Eli's whispered words. "It's gonna be okay. We're safe here. Leon is nice. He looks like us." Noah's voice, trembling and fragile, responded, "But what about Mom? I want Mom." Leon felt a tightness in his chest. Over the past days, the boys had adapted so well, seemed so happy, that he sometimes forgot the loss they'd been through. Evelyn wasn't just his unsolved mystery. She was their mother, the center of their small universe for 6 years. He gently knocked on the door before stepping inside. The boys turned tear-filled eyes toward him, startled. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. They didn't answer with words, but shifted slightly, almost instinctively making room for him. Leon sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the mattress dip under his weight. For a moment, no one spoke. Only Noah's subdued sobs broke the silence. "Did you have a nightmare?" Leon finally asked. Eli shook his head. "No, we just—" He hesitated, glancing at his brother as if asking permission. "We miss Mom," Noah finished, his voice so low Leon could barely hear. The simplicity of those words carried a world of pain. Leon felt suddenly powerless. What could he say to comfort this specific loss? How could he fill the absence of someone so vital? "Is Mom going to come back?" Noah asked, looking up at Leon with those same eyes as his own, shining with equal parts hope and fear. The question hung in the air, heavy with expectations Leon wasn't sure he could meet. He felt torn between painful truth and the compassion those two young faces stirred in him. Eli also watched him carefully, seeking comfort, even though he usually appeared more confident. Right now, he was just a frightened child needing reassurance. "I don't know," Leon answered honestly, deciding not to lie. "But I'm looking for her. I'm doing everything I can to find out where she is." Noah lowered his head as another wave of tears slipped out. "She said she'd come back," he murmured, voice trembling. "She promised." Eli put his arm around his brother's shoulders again. "I miss her every day," he admitted, trying to sound strong but barely managing. Her voice and tone, how she smiled when we did something right. Her smell. The vulnerability of that confession hit Leon deeply. It reminded him of his own childhood, losing his parents young and growing up with distant relatives. Except he only had hazy memories, whereas Eli and Noah had recent, vivid ones of Evelyn. Leon took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "You love her very much, don't you?" he said gently. "And she loves you too." "I'm sure of that." Noah's eyes lifted hopefully. "How do you know?" "Because you're both extraordinary," Leon answered simply. "And because she kept a picture of me. She thought of me, even after all this time." He opened his arms in a silent invitation. After a brief hesitation, the boys scooted closer, nestling against his chest. Leon wrapped them in his arms, feeling their small, trembling bodies still shaken by their sobs. "Listen," he said quietly. "I don't know what happened to your mum, but I promise I'm looking for her. I've hired someone who's an expert in finding people." "Like a detective?" Eli asked, momentarily distracted by curiosity. "Exactly like a detective," Leon confirmed. He's checking hospitals, records, everywhere he can. Silence returned, but now it was less heavy, more thoughtful. What if? Noah started, voice almost inaudible against Leon's shirt. What if he doesn't find her? The question hovered between them, loaded with fear and painful possibilities. Leon swallowed hard, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He couldn't lie, couldn't promise what he wasn't sure he could deliver. I don't know what will happen, he admitted, but I know one thing for sure. He gently pulled back so he could look into their eyes. I can't replace your mom, he said firmly. No one can, but I'm here, and I'm going to take care of you. Always. Something shifted in the boy's expressions, a kind of acceptance and understanding, as though those simple words fulfilled a basic need they hadn't known how to ask for. Promise? Eli whispered. I promise, Leon said without hesitation. You're not alone anymore. Noah rested his head on Leon's shoulder again. Can I tell you a secret? He whispered. Sure. I think you're really our dad. Eli and I both think that... Leon's heart quickened at the children's director's uncomplicated intuition. A small smile curved his lips, despite the emotional moment. I think so too, he confessed. Eli smiled for the first time that night. Can we stay here with you just for tonight? Of course you can, Leon replied. Come on, back under the covers. The boys settled themselves, making room for Leon to lie down between them. Noah on one side, Eli on the other. The small bed barely fit the three of them, but nobody seemed to mind. Leon began to hum softly, recalling a lullaby from his own childhood. He wasn't sure of the lyrics or even the melody, but the boys didn't seem to notice. Gradually, their sobs faded, their breathing steadied, their small bodies relaxed against his. Leon kept humming even after he realized they'd fallen asleep, one hand in Noah's hair, the other on Eli's back. He felt their warmth, their trusting weight. They fell asleep in his arms, their expressions finally peaceful. Tears had dried on their cheeks, leaving only faint trails as a reminder of their pain. Leon remained awake, watching their faces in the soft glow of the nightlight, faces that he recognized more and more as reflections of himself, his children, his responsibility now. I'll find you, Evelyn, he silently promised. For them, for you, for all of us. As night wore on, Leon finally felt sleep approaching. He closed his eyes, comforted by the warmth of the boys, by the rhythm of their synchronized breaths. A strange and new sensation filled him, something he'd never felt before, the feeling of finally being complete. The week had been peaceful. A new routine was emerging in Leon's home. Breakfast together before dropping the boys at a temporary school he'd found, working at his home office while they were away, prepping lunch in advance, picking them up at 3, homework on the kitchen table, dinner together. Small rituals he'd never imagined were now the center of his days. That afternoon, while Eli and Noah played in the living room, the phone rang. The investigator's number appeared on the screen. Ricardo, Leon answered, stepping into the hallway so the boys wouldn't overhear. Mr. Hartley, I have important news, said the investigator, sounding excited. I managed to access some records we were searching for. May I come to your office tomorrow to show you in person? Come straight to my home, Leon replied without hesitation. The boys will be at school. What time? Is 10 o'clock okay? Perfect. Leon hung up, feeling that familiar blend of anxiety and hope. He returned to the living room, where Eli was building a tower of blocks while Noah worked intently on a drawing on the rug. Who was it? Asked Eli, always alert to everything. A colleague from work, Leon answered, deciding not to burden them yet with details of the search for Evelyn. He didn't want to raise their hopes unnecessarily. The next morning, after dropping the boys at school, Leon returned home and waited. At exactly 10, the doorbell rang. Ricardo Mendez was a middle-aged man with graying temples and perceptive eyes behind thin-framed glasses. He carried a worn leather briefcase that contrasted with his immaculate suit. Thank you for coming, Leon said, leading him into the living room. It's always better to discuss certain matters in person, Ricardo replied, sitting down and opening his briefcase, especially when they involve children. Leon sat across from him, trying to maintain professional composure as his heart raced. "What did you find?" Ricardo pulled several documents from the briefcase, organizing them carefully on the coffee table. "Let's go step by step. First, I confirmed what we already suspected. Evelyn Marie Caldwell, biologist, 38 years old, gave birth to twins 6 years ago, Eli and Noah Caldwell, at Midtown General Hospital on May 17th. He placed a copy of the birth certificate on the table. Leon leaned forward, scanning the document. His eyes immediately found the space for the father's name. As mentioned, it was blank. "This is the address where she lived at the time," the investigator continued, pointing to a line on the document. "An apartment in the University District. I visited yesterday. The building is still there, but the apartment has been vacant for at least 2 years, according to the manager." Leon nodded, absorbing each piece of information. "Regarding her career," Ricardo went on, producing another paper, "she was brilliant. PhD in molecular genetics. A promising researcher. She published important articles, mostly on epigenetics." "I knew that," Leon interjected. "She was passionate about her work." "Yes, but here's where things get interesting." Ricardo pointed to a timeline he had created. "About 7 months after the twins were born, she resigned from her lab job without explanation." Leon frowned. "That doesn't make sense. She loved researching." "Exactly. And more curious, after that, she practically vanished from official records for nearly 2 years, reappearing at a small diagnostics lab, well below her qualifications. Almost like she was hiding," Leon murmured, more to himself than to the investigator. Ricardo nodded. "That's my conclusion too. The question is, from whom?" Silence settled over the room as Leon processed the information. Evelyn had abruptly disappeared, leaving behind a promising career, distancing herself from the scientific community. Why? "And in the more recent years?" Leon finally asked. Ricardo sighed, his expression growing more serious. "In the last 3 years, I found records of hospital admissions, initially for exhaustion and malnutrition. Then something more serious." He put a partial medical report on the table, pointing to a highlighted diagnosis. "I'm not a doctor, but it seems to be a rare degenerative condition. As far as I can tell, she was progressively losing muscle control." Leon felt a stab of fear. Evelyn, brilliant, vibrant, facing a degenerative disease alone, raising 2 small children. "Her last hospital admission was about 5 months ago," Ricardo continued. "After that, there's no further record. The boys appear to have briefly entered foster care, but vanished before an official placement." "They ran away," Leon noted. "And found me." Ricardo studied him curiously. "That's extraordinary, given their age. How did they know where to look?" "They had my address. Evelyn kept it." Leon paused, suddenly realizing something. "She maintained my updated address. Even after all these years, even being sick, she knew how to find me." Ricardo adjusted his glasses thoughtfully. "That suggests she was keeping track of your life, Mr. Hartley. Which raises the question, why never contact you? Why keep the twins from you for 6 years, only to apparently guide them to you when she could no longer care for them?" The question hung in the air, weighted with implications. Leon walked to the window, trying to arrange his thoughts. The pieces didn't fit. Evelyn had avoided him for years but kept his address, never told him about the kids, yet left them clues to find him. "There's one more thing," Ricardo said cautiously. "I found references to a research project she led before disappearing, something called Project Mirror." Leon turned, an inexplicable chill running through him. "What was it about?" "Details are restricted. All I know is it involved advanced genetic studies. It was abruptly shut down around the same time she resigned." Leon sat again, struggling to connect the dots. A brilliant scientist abruptly leaves everything. A mysterious, cancelled project. A degenerative disease. Unmentioned children. A father kept in the dark. There was something bigger going on. Something beyond the usual story of a single mom hiding kids from their dad. "Thank you, Ricardo," he said, gathering the documents. "This helps a lot. Please keep digging, especially about Project Mirror, and any updates on Evelyn's current status." After the investigator left, Leon stayed on the sofa, surrounded by the scattered papers. Photos of Evelyn during her lab days, copies of partial medical records, the meticulous timeline Ricardo had prepared. Staring at those fragments of Evelyn's life, Leon sensed he was nearing the truth, and that it could be larger than he ever imagined. Evening settled gently over the city. From Leon's apartment, lights began to sparkle on the horizon like earthbound stars. Inside, dinner was finished, the dishes washed, and a comfortable silence lay over the living room where Eli and Noah drew pictures on the rug. Leon watched them from the couch, his mind still swirling with the information Ricardo had shared. Confirmed birth of the twins, Evelyn's disappearance, the mysterious Project Mirror, all pieces of a puzzle he couldn't solve alone. But there was one piece of that puzzle he could and should share with the boys. "Eli, Noah," he called gently, "can I talk to you for a minute?" They looked up from their drawings, exchanging that silent glance, then nodded. That silent communication always fascinated Leon, like a private language built from looks and subtle gestures. "Come sit with me," he invited, patting the couch on either side of him. They abandoned their colored pencils and took their usual spots beside Leon. Noah, always more reserved, brought along the plush rabbit Leon had bought him the week before. Eli sat more upright, eyes sharp, the first to face whatever came next. Leon took a deep breath. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind all day, but now, in front of their expectant faces, every carefully planned word seemed inadequate. "Remember when you asked if I knew your mom?" he began. They both nodded silently. "Well, I found out more things today," he went on, choosing his words carefully. "And I wanted to talk to you about it." Noah clutched his plush rabbit tighter, as though seeking comfort. Eli leaned forward slightly, curiosity evident. "It's about Mom," Eli asked. "Did you find her?" Leon shook his head. "Not yet, but I'm looking, I promise." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "What I learned is about how I met your mom." Their eyes widened a bit. "You see," Leon continued, "sometimes life is full of strange coincidences. Or maybe they're not coincidences. Maybe they're things that were meant to happen." Eli frowned, trying to follow Leon's reasoning. "Like how we found you?" he asked. Leon smiled. "Exactly like that," he replied. "I believe you found me because, somehow, we were supposed to find each other." He took another deep breath. It was time to speak the truth. "I knew your mom," he said simply. "We had something special, but it was quick. It was early in my career." Noah's eyes went wide. "You dated Mom?" "Yes," Leon confirmed. "For a few months. She was incredible, brilliant. She worked on important things that could help a lot of people." Eli beamed, proud. "She's really smart," he said confidently, as if Evelyn was still around. "Very smart," Leon agreed. "Smarter than me, for sure." Noah let out a small laugh, the soft sound brightening his usually serious face. Leon went on, each word carefully chosen. "We were together for a few months, and then she left, without much explanation. I tried to find her, but she didn't want me to. Eventually, I moved on." He paused, watching their reactions. Both were listening intently, absorbing every word. "She left." Leon hesitated, emotion threatening to choke him. "And now seeing you two," another pause. The next words would change everything, cementing what had so far been a strong suspicion. Leon looked straight into their faces, so much like his own, and said, "I think you might be my children." The sentence hovered in the air like it had its own weight. It wasn't a question nor a direct statement. Say it was a truth finally surfacing after years submerged. Leon waited for some dramatic reaction. Questions, tears, even rejection. Anything would have been understandable, but they didn't react with words. For a few seconds, they remained silent, absorbing the revelation. Then, as if on cue, both simply scooted closer and leaned against Leon. Eli rested his head against Leon's right arm. Noah nestled at his left side, still holding his rabbit. They accept it, because they already feel it. In that moment, Leon realized the revelation wasn't truly a surprise for them. Somehow, in a way beyond words or logic, the boys already knew. Maybe they sensed it from the start. Ever since that night they knocked on his door. He felt tears filling his eyes but made no attempt to hold them back. They fell freely, a physical manifestation of the relief and joy overwhelming him. He lifted his arms and pulled both boys into a hug, feeling their small, warm bodies against his. They were together now, a family that had found each other through unexpected, convoluted paths, but a family nonetheless. "So you really are our dad?" Eli asked at last, voice muffled against Leon's arm. "Yes," Leon answered, with a certainty drawn less from facts than from a deep sense of connection. "I believe I am." "Mom never talked much about you," Noah said in a quiet voice, "but I think she was scared." Leon frowned. "Scared? Of me?" Noah shook his head. "No, of other people. She always said someone was after her." Eli nodded. "We moved around a lot. She always looked worried when we left the house." This new information unsettled Leon. Evelyn on the run, hiding, afraid of others. It aligned with what the investigator found about her vanishing from records and giving up her career. But the questions it raised could wait. Right now, the most important thing was this connection that had just been cemented. The mutual recognition that, despite all the strange circumstances, they belonged to each other. "I'll find out what happened," Leon promised, "and I'll keep you safe, always." "We know," Eli replied simply, as if it were obvious. Noah nestled closer. "Can we call you Dad?" he asked, his soft voice barely above a whisper. Leon felt his heart swell, almost painfully, with love. "Nothing would make me happier," he replied, his voice trembling. The three of them stayed like that for a long time, curled up on the couch as the night stretched on outside. None of them seemed willing to break that moment, as if afraid it might shatter. It was a new sensation for Leon, something money had never been able to buy, something professional success had never provided. The feeling of being whole at last, his children, his family. And still so many questions remained unanswered. The mystery of Evelyn, her disappearance and her fears, the enigmatic Project Mirror, the illness that took her away. But tonight was for celebrating what they had found, not worrying about what was still lost. Tonight was for acceptance, for feeling, for finally being home. The following week after that conversation with the boys brought a new sense of lightness to the apartment. Something fundamental had shifted between them. The words had been spoken, the mutual acknowledgement established. They were a family. Eli began calling Leon Dad almost immediately, as though he'd only been waiting for permission to say the word that was already on the tip of his tongue. Noah, more cautious by nature, still hesitated sometimes, but the word popped up occasionally, especially when he was sleepy or particularly happy. Leon noticed he smiled more. He woke up eager for their small routines, making breakfast, checking the boys' backpacks, hearing about their day as they walked home. Everyday moments he once would have dismissed as mundane now held priceless value. On Thursday, after dropping them at school, Leon headed to his architecture firm for the first time in weeks. A meeting with his partners was necessary. He had to reorganize his projects, delegate tasks, and set a new work schedule that allowed him to be there for his children. It was odd how the word children flowed so naturally in his thoughts now, as though it had always been there, waiting for the right moment to emerge. "You seem different, Leon," said Marina, his oldest business partner, after the meeting. "More at ease." Leon smiled. "I've been going through some big changes," he replied, without elaborating. He wasn't ready to share his new reality with the professional world yet. For the time being, that side of his life, the newly discovered children, the search for Evelyn, remained personal and protected. On the drive back home, he passed a toy store. Without much thought, he stopped, guided by the newly awakened impulse to give simple joys to the boys. He bought a building kit for Eli, who loved constructing things, and an illustrated book on constellations for Noah, who had shown a fascination with the night sky. He was just opening the door to his apartment, shopping bags in hand, when his phone rang. Ricardo's name flashed on the screen. "Ricardo," Leon answered, setting the bags on the foyer table. "Any news?" "Mr. Hartley," the investigator said, sounding more formal and reserved than usual. I have important information. Would you prefer I come by in person or—" Something in Ricardo's tone made Leon stop in his tracks. A chill crept over him. "You can tell me now," he replied, walking to the living room window. "The boys are at school." There was a brief pause on the line, the kind of pause that precedes difficult news. "I found Evelyn," Ricardo finally said. Leon's heart kicked into overdrive. "Where is she? Does she know the boys are with me?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Mr. Hartley," Ricardo's voice hesitated. "I'm sorry to inform you that Evelyn passed away 5 months ago." The world seemed to stop spinning. The words echoed in Leon's ears, but his mind refused to fully process them. Evelyn deceased 5 months ago. How, was all he could ask, his voice coming out hoarse. "Complications from the degenerative disease I mentioned earlier," Ricardo explained, his professional tone softened by genuine sympathy. "She was at St. Gabriel Hospital, alone. No family listed." Leon leaned against the windowsill, his legs suddenly shaky. Evelyn was dead, the mother of his children, the woman who, despite her brief presence in his life, had left an indelible mark. The brilliant scientist who, for reasons still unclear, never told him about his own kids. "I see," he responded mechanically, though he understood nothing at all. "Is there a death certificate?" "Yes, I can send you a digital copy now and bring the physical document tomorrow if you'd like." "Please." Ricardo hesitated again. "There's one more thing, Mr. Hartley. I was able to obtain her belongings from the hospital. They're not much, but they include a flash drive and some documents. I have them with me." "Bring them tomorrow," Leon said. "What time?" "I can be there at 9, fine, if that works." "Yes, the boys will be at school." "Thank you, Ricardo." After ending the call, Leon stood still for several minutes, staring out the window without really seeing the city. Evelyn was gone. By the timeline, the boys had been orphaned right before they showed up at his door. He slowly sat on the sofa, feeling the weight of the news crush his shoulders. Grief welled up, for her, for what could have been different if only she had told him about the pregnancy, if she hadn't disappeared, if they'd raised the boys together. Lost years of possibilities that would never come to be. Yet even in the midst of sorrow, there was a strange sense of purpose. Without letters or warnings, her children had found their way to him. Somehow, in the end, Evelyn had connected the two halves of her fractured family. The rest of the afternoon passed in a fog. Leon called the school to say he'd pick the boys up early. He needed to see them, hold them, confirm they were safe. On the way home, he stopped at an ice cream shop. Not that ice cream could ease what was coming, but it felt important to offer some small comfort before the storm. "Did something happen?" Eli asked as soon as they walked into the apartment, always perceptive. "You look weird." Leon mustered a faint smile, placing the ice cream on the kitchen table. "Let's eat first," he said. "Then we need to talk." The boys exchanged glances, that silent language, but didn't argue. They sat down and ate their ice cream, eyeing Leon with concern. When they finished, Leon guided them to the living room. They all sat on the sofa, the same spot where he'd told them he might be their father. Now he had another, far more painful revelation. "Remember how I hired someone to look for your mum?" he began gently. Both nodded, eyes fixed on him. "Well, he found her," Leon continued, choosing each word carefully. "He discovered what happened to her." Noah leaned forward, hope shining in his eyes. "Is she coming back?" he asked, his small voice full of expectation. Leon's heart constricted. How to say this? How to put into words such a final, cruel truth? "Boys," he started, his voice nearly failing. "Your mum, she went to heaven." There was a moment of absolute silence. The boys' faces froze in confusion, as if the words made no sense or needed translation into a language they could understand. Eli caught on first. His eyes went wide, then filled with tears. "You're saying she died?" he asked, voice trembling. Leon nodded, unable to speak. "No," Noah said, shaking his head violently. "She can't. She promised she'd come back." Tears began streaming down Eli's face, but it was Noah who broke first. A deep sob shook his small frame, then another, until he was openly crying, not trying to hide or control it. Leon opened his arms, and the boys moved into them as though they'd already known exactly where to find solace. Eli and Noah cried together for the first time without holding back, releasing all their pain, their fear, and the loss they'd carried in their short lives. Leon held them tenderly, his own tears mingling with theirs. He wept for Evelyn, for the bright woman he'd once known. He wept for the boys who'd lost their mother too soon. He wept for himself and all the possibilities lost, all the questions that would never have answers. "When?" Eli asked between sobs. "When did she go to heaven?" "5 months ago," Leon said softly. Noah lifted his tear-stained face, confusion contorting his features. But she was in the hospital. We couldn't visit her, but the lady at the shelter said she was there, that she'd get better." Leon stroked his hair gently. "Sometimes people get too sick, even in hospitals," he explained kindly. "Doctors do all they can, but—" He couldn't finish. How could he explain something he barely grasped himself? "Did she know she was going to die?" Eli asked, his sharp mind always searching for understanding. "Is that why we went to the shelter?" "I can't say for sure," Leon answered honestly, "but I think so. I think she knew she was very sick and wanted to make sure you two would be safe." "But we weren't safe," Noah whispered. "The shelter was bad. No one liked us there." Leon's heart clenched even tighter. How many hardships had these children already faced? How much suffering had they endured alone? "You're safe now," he said firmly. "I'm here, and I'm going to take care of you." He looked into each pair of eyes, first Eli's, then Noah's, making sure they understood how serious he was about that promise. "I'm going to be a good father. I promise." The boys hugged him tightly, as if trying to fuse themselves to him, seeking a secure refuge from the harshness of the world. They stayed that way, wrapped in each other's arms on the sofa, crying together for a long time. Words were unnecessary. Only presence mattered, shared warmth, mutual recognition of pain and hope intertwined. Slowly, the sobs subsided. Tears continued to flow, but more quietly, like a storm losing its force but leaving everything washed clean. "Would you like to see what I bought today?" Leon finally asked, hoping to offer a small distraction. "I got a building kit for you, Eli, and a star book for you, Noah." They nodded softly, still clinging to him, reluctant to break the physical contact. "Mom liked stars," Noah said, his voice hoarse from crying. "She said stars are like the people we love. Even when we can't see them, they're still there." Leon felt fresh tears well up. What an incredible mother Evelyn must have been. What an immeasurable loss for these boys. "She was right," he whispered. "And you know something. I think she left a map for you to find me. So we could have each other when she couldn't be here anymore." Eli looked at him, eyes red but intent. "What do you mean? You told me you found my address in an envelope of hers, right?" Both boys nodded. "And you got here on your own, which was very brave but also very dangerous." He paused to gather his thoughts. "I believe your mum knew that if something happened to her, you'd need me. She left a way for you to find me." "So, she wanted us to stay with you?" Noah asked, a glimmer of hope in his voice. "I believe so," Leon replied. "Tomorrow, I'll receive some of her belongings. Maybe we'll find more answers there." That night, the boys didn't want to sleep alone. Leon arranged his own bed to accommodate all three of them. Eli and Noah curled up at his sides like two small kittens seeking warmth and security. As he watched them drift off to sleep, their faces still marked by tears but finally peaceful, Leon felt a new determination spark within him. He had no idea what Evelyn's belongings would reveal. He still didn't understand the mysteries surrounding her disappearance, her illness or Project Mirror. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. These boys were his responsibility now, his family, his blood, his life. And so, a family begins to stitch itself together, thread by thread, in truth and affection. The painful truth of losing Evelyn, the growing affection between father and sons, the truth of a complicated past yet to be uncovered, the affection that defies lost time and builds new possibilities. Before sleep took him, with one child on each side, Leon made a silent promise to Evelyn, wherever she might be. "I'll take care of them, I'll protect them." I'll love them for both of us. In the quiet of the night, as the city slumbered outside, something solidified in that once lonely, empty apartment, something beyond walls and expensive furniture, something alive, imperfect, painful, but genuine. A home, a family, a second chance. The weeks rolled on like pages of a book. Fall slipped in through the windows with its golden light and shorter afternoons. 3 months had passed since the night Eli and Noah knocked on Leon's door. The grief for Evelyn's death was slowly finding its place. It hadn't vanished. Leon knew it would never fully vanish for the boys, but it had softened into something that could coexist with happiness. One Saturday morning, Leon woke up resolved. The home office where he spent hours drafting architectural designs needed to change. The small guest room the boys occupied was too cramped for 2 kids. Besides, he had just received provisional custody the previous week. Soon it would be permanent. "Boys, I have a project for us," he announced at breakfast. "We're going to turn my office into a real bedroom for you." Eli's eyes widened. "But what about your work?" he asked, always concerned about adults. "I can work at the dining table when you're at school," Leon replied simply. "Or in my main office. I don't need that space at home anymore." He didn't say what he really thought, that architectural projects, awards, and recognition no longer mattered as much as the 2 faces looking at him from across the table. After breakfast, the 3 headed into the office. Leon viewed the space with fresh eyes. Tall shelves filled with technical books, an expensive drafting table, a leather armchair, a view of the city. Stylish, functional, and totally unsuitable for kids. "What do you think we need in your new room?" he asked, kneeling to their eye level. 2 beds, Noah suggested timidly. "Definitely 2 beds," Leon agreed with a smile. "What else?" Eli surveyed the space thoughtfully. "Low shelves for our books, and a place for toys. And a light that's not too dark at bedtime," Noah added, "like the moon lamp we had in our old room." Leon's heart squeezed a bit. It was the first time Noah had spontaneously mentioned the home they'd shared with Evelyn. "A moon-shaped lamp," he repeated in his mind. "Great idea." They spent the morning clearing out the office. Leon let the boys help even though it slowed the process. They packed books into boxes, dismantled the table, took down framed pictures. "Look what I found," Eli exclaimed, rummaging through a forgotten drawer. It was an old photo album Leon barely remembered. "Can we see?" The 3 of them sat on the empty floor, flipping through the album. There were pictures of a younger Leon, his college graduation, standing in front of buildings he'd designed. Then, a page that made his heart skip. Him and Evelyn at an opening gala, smiling at the camera. "It's Mom," Noah whispered, touching the photo reverently. Leon nodded, speechless. There she was, exactly as he remembered. Dark hair, sharp eyes, that smile that hinted at secrets. "Can we put this photo in our new room?" Eli asked. "Of course you can," Leon replied, his voice choking slightly. The transformation continued over the next few days. They bought 2 beds, low shelves, a soft rug. Leon insisted the boys pick their own sheets, green for Eli, blue with stars for Noah. They found a moon-shaped lamp that cast a comforting glow. One afternoon, while Leon assembled shelves, the boys decided to make a surprise snack. From the doorway, he watched Eli determined to craft perfect sandwiches, while Noah carefully arranged cups on a tray. "Need any help?" Leon asked, popping into the kitchen. "No," they chorused. "It's a surprise." Leon smiled and returned to work. Minutes later, they came in proudly carrying a tray loaded with messy sandwiches and orange juice. "We did it all by ourselves," Eli announced. The taste was of love, dedication, a family being built, sandwich by sandwich. That night, as they finished organizing books on the new shelves, Leon had an idea. "How about some music while we work?" He connected his phone to a speaker and put on an old playlist. Soon they were guessing song names and bands, laughing at each other's failed attempts. Noah, usually so quiet, displayed a surprisingly good musical memory. "That's Blackbird," he exclaimed when the first notes of a Beatles song played. "Mom used to sing that to us before bed." Instead of sadness, the memory made them smile. Leon pictured Evelyn softly singing the boys to sleep. A part of her still lived in those shared moments. By Friday, the room was finished. A soft shade of blue on the walls, the bed set perpendicular to the windows, shelves already filled with books and toys, and the moon lamp glowing between them. "We just need one more thing," Leon said, carrying a flat package. It was a simple frame. Inside was a drawing the boys had made a few days before, 3 stick figures holding hands, the tallest in the middle. "Where should we hang it?" he asked. The boys immediately pointed to the wall between their beds, the perfect spot where it would be the first and last thing they saw each day. Leon hung it carefully, then stepped back to admire. It wasn't something you'd see in a designer magazine. It was far more precious. A space made with love, tailored to the needs of 2 children who had known so much hardship. That night, after the official grand opening of the new room, complete with a little celebration and ice cream for dessert, Leon paused at the door to wish them good night. Eli was nearly asleep under his green sheets, while Noah flipped through his constellation book, the moon lamp casting soft shadows over his focused face. "Good night, boys," Leon said. "Good night, Dad," they replied in unison, the word now so natural they didn't notice how profoundly it still affected Leon. He gently closed the door and walked through a home that had once seemed so empty. Now it overflowed with signs of shared life. Drawings on the fridge, little shoes in the hallway, the occasional misplaced toy, a children's book left open on the couch. The house had soul now, and they had each other. Leon stepped onto the balcony and looked out over the city. Somewhere amid those lights not long ago, Evelyn had held these same boys, sung to them, loved them. And somehow, through paths he still didn't entirely understand, she'd sent them to him. "Thank you," he thought, hoping she could somehow hear, for raising such extraordinary kids, for trusting him despite everything, for completing something he never knew was incomplete. On the wall of their new room, 3 stick figures holding hands grinned in childlike smiles, such a simple image of something infinitely complex and precious, a family finding its way back home. The weeks drifted by like pages turning in a book. Fall softly spread its golden glow and the afternoons grew shorter. 3 months had passed since the night Eli and Noah had appeared at Leon's door. The sorrow over Evelyn's passing gradually found its place. It never disappeared. Leon knew it wouldn't for the boys, but it turned into something gentler that could coexist with happiness. One Saturday morning, Leon woke up with resolve. The home office he'd used for hours of architectural work had to be repurposed. The boys' small guest room was too cramped for 2, and they had received provisional custody a week before. Soon, it would be official. "Boys, I have a project for us," he announced over breakfast. "Let's turn my office into a real bedroom for you." Eli's eyes went wide. "But what about your job?" he asked, always the worrier. "I can work at the dining table when you're at school," Leon said simply. "Or at my main office. I don't need that space here anymore." He didn't voice his real thoughts, that architectural achievements, awards, and recognition had lost much of their importance compared to the 2 little faces across the table. After breakfast, the 3 of them moved to the office. Leon surveyed the space with fresh eyes, tall shelves of technical books, an expensive drafting table, a leather chair, the city view, sleek, functional, and totally unfit for children. "What do you think the room needs?" he asked, crouching to their level. 2 beds, Noah suggested shyly. "Definitely 2 beds, Leon agreed, smiling. "What else?" Eli looked around thoughtfully. "Lower shelves for our books, and somewhere to keep our toys. And a light that's not too dark at night," Noah added, "like the moon in our old room." Leon's chest tightened. It was the first time Noah had spontaneously mentioned living with Evelyn. "Her moon-shaped lamp," he mentally noted. "Great idea." They spent the morning clearing out the office. Leon let the boys help, which made it slower but more meaningful. They packed books in boxes, dismantled the table, and removed pictures from the walls. "Hey, look at this," Eli said, rummaging in a forgotten drawer. It was an old photo album Leon barely remembered. "Can't we look at it?" The 3 of them sat on the empty floor, flipping through it. There were photos of a younger Leon at graduation in front of buildings he'd designed. Then a page that made his heart leap, Him and Evelyn at a building inauguration, smiling into the camera. "It's Mom," Noah breathed, touching the image gently. Leon nodded, words failing him. She looked exactly as he recalled. Dark hair, keen eyes, that enigmatic smile. "Could we put this in our new room?" Eli asked. "Of course you can," Leon said, voice tight with emotion. Over the following days, the transformation continued. They bought 2 beds, shorter shelves, and a soft rug. Leon insisted the boys choose their own bedding, green for Eli, blue with stars for Noah. They found a moon-shaped lamp that cast a gentle, comforting light. One afternoon, while Leon was assembling the new shelves, the boys decided to make a surprise snack. From the office door, he watched them in the kitchen, Eli determined to assemble perfect sandwiches, Noah carefully lining up cups on a tray. "Need help?" Leon asked, poking his head in. "No," they both replied. "It's a surprise." Leon laughed and went back to work. Minutes later, they proudly arrived, carrying a tray with slightly messy sandwiches and juice. "We did it all by ourselves," Eli declared. It tasted like love, dedication, and a family being built, one sandwich at a time. That evening, as they finished placing books on the new shelves, Leon had an idea. "How about some music while we work?" He connected his phone to a speaker and played an old playlist. Soon they were guessing the names of the songs and bands, laughing at each other's wrong guesses. Noah, usually the quiet one, surprised them with his musical memory. "That's Blackbird," he cried when the first guitar note started. "Mom used to sing it to us at bedtime." Rather than sadness, the memory brought smiles. Leon imagined Evelyn singing softly to the boys. A piece of her still lived on in these shared memories. By Friday, the new bedroom was complete. Soft blue paint, beds placed near the windows, shelves filled with books and toys, the moon lamp set between the 2 beds. "Just one thing left," Leon said, holding a flat package. It was a simple frame, inside of which was a drawing the boys had made days earlier. 3 figures with joined hands, the tallest in the middle. "Where should we hang it?" he asked. Immediately, they both pointed to the wall between the beds, the perfect spot, where it would be the first and last thing they saw every day. Leon hung the picture carefully, then stepped back to admire. It wasn't magazine-worthy or anything an award panel would celebrate, but it was infinitely more valuable, a space shaped by love for 2 children who'd endured far too much. That night, after a grand opening of the new bedroom, including a little party and ice cream, Leon stopped at the door to say goodnight. Eli was nearly asleep under his green sheets, while Noah was leafing through his constellation book, the moon lamp casting gentle shadows across his focused face. "Good night, boys," Leon said. "Good night, Dad," they answered in unison, neither realizing how powerful that word still was for Leon. He closed the door softly and walked through a home that had once felt so empty. Now it was filled with evidence of shared living, drawings on the fridge, tiny shoes in the entryway, forgotten toys in corners, a children's book left open on the couch. This house had heart, and they had each other. Leon sat on the balcony, gazing at the city. Somewhere out there, not too long ago, Evelyn had held these same boys, sung to them, loved them. And somehow, through paths he still didn't fully grasp, she'd guided them into his life. "Thank you," he thought, wondering if she could somehow hear. For raising such incredible children, for trusting him even after everything, for completing something he hadn't even known was incomplete. On the wall of their new room, 3 stick figures with joined hands smiled in childish joy, a simple image of something vast and profound, a family finding its way home. Spring arrived, coloring the city. Flowers in the parks, longer days, windows open to let in the mild breeze. For Leon and the boys, the season also brought the promise of permanence. They were just a few steps away from official guardianship. The social workers' reports were flawless. The home visits confirmed what anyone could see. These 3 belonged together. The DNA test, which Leon had hesitated over but eventually took, merely confirmed what their hearts already knew. That Thursday afternoon, the sun was still high, illuminating the dining table where Leon helped Noah with homework, a collage project about the solar system. "No, Earth is blue," Noah explained, his perfectionism evident even in the simplest tasks. "And it needs green too, lots of trees," Leon grinned, lining up the glitter glue tubes Noah insisted on using. "Scientifically correct," he agreed, winking at Eli, who was working on a mysterious drawing at the other end of the table. They were so immersed in that simple routine, so naturally bonded as a family, that they almost missed the significance when it happened. Eli held up the drawing he was making and turned it toward Leon. "Dad, check this out," he said, casually, as though commenting on the weather. Leon froze. The glitter glue was suspended mid-air, forgotten. "Dad," Eli repeated, perplexed at Leon's reaction. "It's a rocket. I drew it for our room." For months, the boys had alternated between calling him Leon or Dad, more often the former. Almost like they were testing it out, uncertain of crossing that final line. Eli had called him Dad before, but mostly in emotional moments, never in the casual simplicity of everyday life, never with this absolute naturalness. "Dad," Noah echoed, smiling, as if testing the word's sound, its meaning, its weight. Leon felt his breath catch for a moment. Such a simple word, Dad, yet so incredibly significant. More meaningful than architect he, Mr. Hartley, boss, or any other title he'd ever worn. Then he smiled, too, a smile that started small and grew, lighting up his entire face. It reached his eyes, made his heart pound. "That's an amazing rocket," he finally answered, voice thick with emotion. Very detailed. Life went on that late afternoon with more glitter on planets, more paper rockets, and mac and cheese for dinner. But something had changed, or rather, something had solidified. At last, they had called him Dad, and he recognized himself in that role. Days turned into weeks, then months. Summer came and went. Early in the fall, however, the long-awaited event occurred. Permanent custody was granted. They left the courtroom not just in the eyes of the law, but in every sense, a complete family. Leon held the certificates as if they were priceless artifacts. Noah and Eli wore the ties they'd chosen specifically for the occasion. "So now it's forever?" Noah asked, ever the cautious one, as they headed home. "Now it's forever," Leon confirmed, squeezing his small hand. The next morning, Leon woke up earlier than usual. He prepared a special breakfast, animal-shaped pancakes, honey, fresh fruit. While the boys still slept, he placed a wrapped gift in the center of the living room table. When they appeared, still yawning in their pajamas, their eyes widened at the sight of the breakfast spread. "What's that?" Eli asked, pointing at the package. "Open it and see," Leon said, his heart brimming with joy he hadn't known was possible. Together they tore off the paper. Inside was a silver picture frame. The photo showed the three of them, arms around each other, smiling on the courthouse steps. Leon, Eli, and Noah, their faces shining with genuine happiness. "Our family," Noah said, running his fingers over the frame. "Our family," Leon echoed, the word never sounding so full, so certain. They set the frame in the middle of the living room table, where everyone could see, a tangible symbol of what they'd built together. The apartment now resounded with noise, the thumping of little feet on Sunday mornings, the laughter of board games on rainy nights, the light-hearted arguments over who got the bathroom first or who chose the Friday movie. Day-to-day life had shape and meaning. Leon flipping pancakes on weekends, his new specialty, perfected for the boys. Eli reading adventure novels aloud, his fluency improving daily. Noah composing funny songs in the shower, his initial shyness giving way to surprising creativity. There were struggles, of course. Low test scores at school, occasional nightmares. Days when a sudden wave of missing Evelyn would hit the boys, making them quiet and introspective. At every turn, Leon was there. Not with all the answers, but with all the presence he could offer. The enigma of Project Mirror, once so urgent to Leon, gradually lost its grip on him. It didn't matter how or why they'd come together, only that they were together now. One Saturday afternoon, with autumn painting the park in shades of gold and red, Leon sat on a bench watching Eli and Noah play on the playground. Eli, confident and energetic, dangled upside down on the monkey bars. Noah, more reserved, carefully built a sandcastle in the sandbox. So different, yet so alike, perfectly themselves. He thought about how his life had changed in just 1 year. The once empty, silent home now brimming with activity. The job that once consumed all his thoughts and time, now only part of who he was. The loneliness that had been his daily companion, now just a distant memory of someone he barely recognized. I waited my whole life for there, he thought, feeling the late afternoon sun warm his face, and it was worth the wait. Eli waved from the top of the slide, grinning wide. Noah, proud of his finished sandcastle, stood up to show it off. Leon waved back, heart flooded with a love he never knew he could feel. Love that didn't diminish with time, but grew, expanded, found new corners to fill. End of the story. Beginning of happiness. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like, because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.